Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. My boyfriend Ryan Carter, the campus golden boy, and I were both reborn. In our previous life, we were both guaranteed admission to a top university. After graduation, we got married and became the couple everyone envied. The perfect match everyone admired. In this life, during the final defense for the direct admission program, the professors were full of praise for my performance. But then Ryan suddenly stood up and said, "Professor, I want to report that Emma Nolan plagiarized my thesis, and I request that Emma's guaranteed admission spot be given to Lily Moore instead." He stared straight at me, his words cold and deliberate. "Emma, back then, you framed Lily for academic misconduct. You destroyed her future and drove her into depression until she dropped out and took her own life. You owe her that life, and in this lifetime you should pay it back." So that's how it was. Ryan wanted to play the righteous hero saving the poor, fragile, depressed girl. I looked at him, then at Professor Quinn, the department chair, the same professor who'd admired me most in my previous life. Even he looked conflicted now. Honestly, I didn't want to stay any longer. "Professor Quinn," I said calmly, "I remember you mentioned that your national-level research project still needs an assistant." The conference room went dead silent. Everyone's eyes moved between me, Ryan, and Professor Quinn. The professor adjusted his glasses, his sharp gaze cutting right through me. "Emma, think carefully. There's only one guaranteed admission slot. If you give it up, there's no turning back." I nodded slightly. I thought it through. A flicker of surprise flashed across Ryan's face, quickly replaced by disdain. "Emma, what trick are you trying to pull now? Quitting to threaten someone?" Lily gently tugged on his sleeve, her voice soft and trembling. "Ryan, don't talk to Emma like that. It's my fault. If it weren't for me." Her eyes grew red, tears welling as if she could collapse at any second. Ryan immediately pulled her behind him, protecting her with a glare that felt like ice. "Lily, don't be afraid. I'm here. No one will ever bully you again." He turned back to me, his tone full of mockery. "Emma, even if you kneel and beg today, this spot will still go to Lily." I almost laughed. These two could have won awards for acting. What a waste of talent staying in academia. I ignored them and turned to Professor Quinn. "Professor, is your project still short on assistants?" He looked at me for a long moment, then glanced at the pair standing there pretending to be so noble and pitiful. Finally, he smiled faintly. "Come to my office at 8 tomorrow morning." Everyone in the room exchanged looks before leaving one by one until only the three of us remained. Ryan clearly hadn't expected things to turn out this way. His face twisted in anger. "Emma, do you think joining Professor Quinn's project makes you something special? You're just a glorified assistant. Someone as malicious as you deserves to fall from the clouds." I walked past him holding my documents tightly, not slowing down. "Sorry to disappoint you," I said evenly. "I never thought that so-called guaranteed admission was any kind of heaven." Then I stopped, turned back and looked him straight in the eye. "Ryan Carter, I just hope you don't end up crying over your little hero saves the damsel act someday." His face turned an ugly shade of red. Behind him, Lily hid half her face behind his shoulder, her eyes gleaming with a faint trace of smugness and resentment. I didn't stay another second. I walked straight out of the academic building. Outside, the sunlight was warm and bright, wrapping me in a gentle glow. Good. In this life, I was going to live differently. The first thing I did was move out from the small apartment Ryan and I used to rent together. I moved out every single one of my belongings, not leaving a trace behind. When Ryan came home and saw that half the apartment was empty, he froze. "Emma, are you done making a scene yet?" he asked sharply. I sealed the last box shut with tape and said evenly, "I'm not making a scene. Just returning things to where they belong. This place is your lease. I'm leaving." He stared at me, his expression a mix of anger, confusion, and though he probably didn't realize it, panic. "You really have to do this? Where do you think you can go without me?" I stood up and looked at the man who had been by my side for years. "Ryan Carter, do you really think I can't live without you?" He froze, caught off guard by my question. I smiled faintly, pulled my suitcase toward the door and said softly, "Maybe before, but not anymore." With a loud bang, I shut the door, and with it our past. I found a tiny studio apartment near campus and managed to settle in. The next morning, I arrived at Professor Quinn's office right on time. He wasn't alone. A few unfamiliar faces were there. They looked like graduate or doctoral students. Their eyes were full of skepticism and thinly veiled hostility. "So this is the undergrad who gave up her guaranteed admission just to join us," someone muttered. "Pretty bold. Wonder if she's got the skills to back it up." "Old Quinn must be losing it," another whispered. "He's taking just anyone now." Their voices weren't loud, but just enough for me to hear. Professor Quinn cleared his throat. Instantly, the room fell silent. "Emma, let me introduce you," he said, gesturing toward a tall man with glasses. "This is your senior, Mason Lee. You'll be working under him." Mason pushed up his glasses and gave me a curt nod, his tone cool. "Welcome." That was as much of a greeting as I got. "There are rules in this research group," he said flatly. "We don't care about your past grades, only your ability. If you can't keep up, you're free to leave anytime." I nodded. "Understood." "Mason." My work started from the bottom, organizing the most basic experimental data. The project's research focus was on high-energy particle dynamic evolution models, one of the most cutting-edge fields in physics. To an undergrad like me, the data and equations might as well have been written in another language. I spent my days buried in the library and the lab, barely stopping to eat or sleep. Even my dorm mates joked that I'd vanished from the world. Mason was cold but meticulous. Whenever I asked him a question, he'd answer, though usually with a jab. "You don't even understand something that basic. How did you have the guts to join this project?" I didn't mind. I knew exactly what I wanted. More than a month passed and I gradually adapted to the team's rhythm. I was exhausted every day, but it was a fulfilling kind of tiredness. One afternoon, as I stepped out of the lab carrying a stack of reports, I nearly ran into two people, Ryan Carter and Lily Moore. They were holding hands, looking inseparable. The new campus golden couple everyone admired. When Ryan saw me, his smile froze. His eyes were full of disgust. "Emma, what are you doing here?" His gaze swept over me, my worn-out face, the pile of documents in my arms, and a smirk tugged at his lips. "I heard you're running errands for Professor Quinn. Not so glamorous anymore, huh?" Lily quickly spoke up, her voice soft and delicate. "Ryan, don't say that about Emma. I'm sure she has her own goals." She turned to me with an innocent look. "Emma, are you doing okay?" "I heard Professor Quinn's project is really tough," Lily said softly. "If you're getting too tired, you can tell Ryan he can talk to the professor for you." I cut her off before she could finish. "That won't be necessary." Then I stepped aside, ready to walk away. "Stop right there." Ryan grabbed my wrist hard. So hard it felt like he wanted to crush it. "Emma, what kind of attitude is that? Lily was just being kind. Don't be so ungrateful." I frowned and jerked my arm free. "Ryan Carter, we're done. So please show some respect and keep your girlfriend in check. Tell her not to hand out her cheap sympathy everywhere." "I don't need it." Ryan's face turned pale with anger while tears welled up again in Lily's eyes. "Emma, I just wanted to help you," she stammered, her voice trembling. "Why would you say that about me?" By now, a few students passing by had started whispering. "Isn't that Emma Nolan?" one said. "I heard she lost her guaranteed admission for bad conduct." "Yeah, and now Ryan's dating Lily. She must be bitter. Look at her. Serves her right." Ryan's lips curled in satisfaction as he caught those murmurs. That was exactly what he wanted, to make everyone believe that without him, I was nothing, that I'd fallen from grace and was now crawling through the mud. "Emma, did you hear that?" he said coldly. "That's karma. You got what you deserved for what you did to Lily. Our Lily only needs to look beautiful and enjoy life. She doesn't have to suffer like you suffer." So in their eyes, hard work and study counted as suffering. I smiled faintly, meeting his gaze. "Ryan Carter, you'd better pray that your precious Lily gets to keep enjoying her life like this." Behind me, I could hear Ryan's cold scoff and Lily's weak attempt to calm him down. I hugged the stack of files to my chest and walked back to the lab step by step. Deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Ryan's revenge would never be that simple. The project soon entered a critical stage. A core algorithm simulation's results kept showing huge deviations from the theoretical expectations. The entire team was under a dark cloud. Several sleepless nights in a row and still no clue where the error lay. The atmosphere in the lab was so tense it felt like the air itself could be wrung out. Professor Quinn's brows were furrowed tightly as he chain-smoked one cigarette after another. Mason's hair looked like a bird's nest, his bloodshot eyes glued to the lines of data on the screen. "No, still wrong," he muttered and slammed a fist against the table. "We've checked every parameter, rebuilt the model multiple times. What the hell is wrong?" Another doctoral student sighed. Could it be that the theoretical model itself has flaws? Professor Quinn shook his head firmly. Impossible. This model represents the cutting edge of the field. It's been verified repeatedly. The problem must be in our algorithm or data process. Silence fell again. For the past month, besides organizing data, I had gone through nearly every related paper and reference material I could find. I stared at the diverging curve on the screen, and a vague idea began to take shape in my mind. I took a deep breath and stood up. "Professor Quinn, I have an idea." All eyes turned to me instantly. Mason frowned. "Emma, don't mess around. This isn't an undergrad Q&A session." I ignored him and walked straight to the main control computer. "I don't think the problem lies in the parameters," I said clearly. "It's in the iteration logic of the algorithm. We've been using the assumption of linear convergence. But what if at certain energy thresholds, the particle's evolution path becomes nonlinear or even chaotic?" I paused for a moment, meeting their startled gazes. "We could try introducing a dynamic perturbation factor with each iteration. We can apply a slight random correction to the initial conditions to simulate the chaotic effect." As soon as I finished speaking, Mason let out a mocking laugh. "Are you kidding me? A dynamic perturbation that would completely destroy the model's stability. Emma, I'll admit you've been working hard, but this is a national-level project, not some playground for your imagination. Do you even understand what chaos theory means?" I was just about to respond when the lab door opened. Ryan Carter walked in holding a folder, a polite smile on his face. "Professor Quinn, here's the cross-project report you requested." He caught sight of me and had clearly overheard Mason's words because that polite smile twisted into something smug. "Well, if it isn't the campus genius Emma Nolan, sharing your brilliant insights again." He stepped closer to Mason, glanced at the screen and said with feigned surprise, "A dynamic perturbation factor. Emma, have you been reading too much science fiction? Some problems can't be solved with clever little tricks. You should stick to your assigned errands and not get ahead of yourself." His tone wasn't loud, but every word landed sharply, echoing through the silent lab. Mason, emboldened, immediately chimed in. "You heard him. Even someone outside our department gets it." Now everyone in the lab was staring at me. Some amused, some pitying, others just waiting to see me humiliated. I stood there feeling like a clown on display. I clenched my fists and looked toward Professor Quinn. His face was unreadable, no expression at all, his deep gaze giving nothing away. My heart sank. Then, breaking the silence, he said calmly, "Run the simulation using her method." Mason froze. "Professor, that's too risky. What if the data is completely corrupted?" "I'll take responsibility if it is," Professor Quinn replied firmly, his tone brooking no argument. He walked over, patted my shoulder and said, "Go ahead, Emma. You take the controls." I drew in a deep breath, nodded and sat down at the main console. Ryan's expression darkened instantly. He looked from Professor Quinn to me in disbelief, his lips parting as if to protest, but in the end, he said nothing. He just stood there, face tense and eyes cold. I began typing quickly, integrating the new algorithm logic into the system. The entire lab held its breath, eyes locked on the screen. Only the rhythmic clatter of the keyboard echoed through the tense air. "Done," I whispered, pressing enter. Data began streaming across the screen. The new simulation curve started forming. At first, it fluctuated wildly, and Mason's expression turned smug as if to say, "I told you so." Ryan's mouth curled into a faint mocking smile. But gradually, the oscillations began to smooth out. "It's working," one of the grad students exclaimed, unable to contain themselves. A moment later, the entire lab erupted into cheers and applause. Mason just stared at the screen, mouth hanging open as if he could swallow an egg whole. He turned to me, eyes wide with disbelief. Professor Quinn let out a long, relieved breath. a rare smile lighting his face. He stepped forward, clapping me hard on the shoulder. "Excellent work, Emma Nolan. You just saved the entire project." I smiled back, my eyes stinging with tears. I tried to blink away. Ryan had already slipped out of the room the moment the results appeared. Watching his retreating figure, all I could think was how utterly defeated he looked. From that day on, my position in the research team changed completely. No one called me that undergrad anymore. They started calling me Emma, or Emma, our junior sister. Mason, in particular, did a complete 180. He followed me around constantly, grinning from ear to ear. "Emma genius," he'd say. "How do you solve this matrix transformation faster? Emma genius, can you explain that random matrix theory you mentioned last time again?" Even Professor Quinn officially accepted me as his final student and began personally guiding my research. I became one of the core members of the project team. Ryan Carter saw all of it. He tried to talk to me several times, but I always refused, using the excuse that I was busy with experiments. He probably couldn't understand how the woman he had thrown away, the one he thought was worthless, had managed to rise so high so fast. Time flew by. When our paper was published, it caused quite a stir in the academic community. My name, listed as the second author, appeared for the first time in one of the world's top physics journals. The rumors and gossip about me on campus gradually faded away, replaced by surprise and admiration. On the other hand, things between Ryan and Lily Moore weren't going so well. With Ryan's help, Lily had secured her guaranteed admission and entered graduate school. But her foundation was weak. Too weak. She couldn't keep up with the advanced coursework or the research. During group discussions, she rarely spoke. When professors assigned literature reviews, she couldn't even grasp the basic concepts. She started relying on Ryan more and more. At first, he patiently tutored her and even helped her with her assignments. But gradually, his impatience began to show. One afternoon, I happened to be in the library sitting at the table next to them, flipping through some research papers. "Ryan, I still don't understand this model," Lily said, her voice trembling with tears. "Can you explain it again?" "I've explained it 3 times already," Ryan hissed under his breath, clearly irritated. "It's just a few formulas. How can it be that hard? I'm just dumb." "Okay," she stammered. All right, stop crying. I'll just do it for you." I shook my head and quietly switched seats, no longer interested in watching their little drama unfold. Not long after, the university hosted a prestigious academic forum. Professor Quinn was invited as a special guest and brought me along. During the event, I gave a short presentation about our research results. When the talk ended, I was surrounded by scholars and experts eager to discuss and exchange ideas. I stood in the center of the crowd, calm and confident, answering questions and debating theories. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of a familiar figure standing quietly in the corner of the hall. Ryan Carter. He was watching me intently, his eyes filled with shock, loss, and perhaps a hint of regret. Beside him, Lily was tugging on his arm, saying something with a pout, but he didn't seem to hear her. His gaze never left me. In that moment, I almost felt sorry for him. He'd always thought of himself as a dragon-slaying hero who had saved a helpless princess, not realizing that what he'd thrown away was actually a sword sharp enough to cut through steel. And the princess in his arms. She was nothing more than a fragile bloom, surviving only by clinging to him. Our project eventually won the National Award for Scientific and Technological Progress, one of the highest honors in the field. The award ceremony was held in Beijing, grand and prestigious. Professor Quinn, as the project leader, personally went on stage to accept the award, and I stood beside him, one of the team's core members. Sitting in the front row, I could feel the air charged with energy and expectation. During the project presentation segment, Professor Quinn appointed me as one of the speakers to report on our team's most critical algorithmic breakthrough to the attending scholars and leaders. I wore a fitted suit and stood confidently under the bright spotlight, speaking fluently and with ease. In the back rows of the audience sat Ryan Carter and Lily Moore, invited as outstanding student representatives to observe the event. Even without looking directly at him, I could feel Ryan's gaze, sharp and unyielding like a searchlight, locked onto me. When my presentation ended, the floor opened for questions. A professor from a rival university stood up, adjusting his glasses, a sly smile playing on his lips. "Miss Nolan," he began, "your reputation precedes you. I've heard that during your undergraduate studies, you were disqualified from your guaranteed admission due to an issue of academic misconduct. Tell me, for a researcher with such a history, how can we be certain that today's brilliant algorithm is truly your own original work?" The audience erupted in murmurs. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, filled with suspicion and curiosity. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a flicker of satisfaction on Ryan's face, subtle but unmistakable. I was about to respond, but Professor Quinn spoke first. He picked up the microphone, his tone calm and measured. "Could you please project my email inbox onto the main screen?" he said to the staff. The room went silent, puzzled, but the technicians complied. A moment later, Professor Quinn's inbox appeared on the giant screen. He moved the mouse and opened an email sent 2 years ago by me. The timestamp showed that it had been sent 3 months before Ryan had accused me of plagiarism. The email contained a detailed research proposal, a full explanation of the initial concept of the dynamic perturbation factor, its theoretical basis, and a preliminary algorithmic framework. It was the embryonic version of the revolutionary model I would later develop for the project team. Professor Quinn's voice echoed clearly through the microphone, filling the entire hall. "This concept," he said, "was something Emma Nolan discussed in depth with me 2 years ago as part of her undergraduate thesis proposal. At the time, I thought the idea was too advanced and difficult to realize, and I advised her to choose a safer topic instead. But she didn't give up. She continued researching it privately." He paused, then looked toward the back row of the audience, his gaze sharp as a blade, slicing straight through Ryan Carter. "As for the so-called original paper submitted by Ryan Carter at the time," Professor Quinn continued, "it was nothing more than a simplified and frankly flawed fragment of Emma's much larger conceptual framework. So, as to who plagiarized whom, I believe our esteemed colleagues here can judge for themselves." The entire hall felt utterly silent. The email on the screen hit like a thunderous slap, landing squarely across Ryan's face, his expression drained of color. He staggered slightly, staring at the screen in disbelief, then at me, his lips trembling, unable to form a single word. So that was the truth. In my previous life, this idea had been the product of our so-called love. I had shared every spark of inspiration with him without reservation. To help him gain recognition faster, I had even offered to let him be the first author. I had believed we were partners, 2 minds working side by side, 2 souls deeply connected. But in reality, he had already taken my devotion for granted, using my efforts as his stepping stone. And in this life he came back with all that resentment, not that desperate to destroy me the moment he got the chance. He never realized that the so-called evidence he had used to accuse me had belonged to me from the very beginning. And as for Lily Moore, in our previous life, her ruined future had nothing to do with any supposed academic misconduct. The truth was, she had been caught cheating during a major exam with solid evidence against her. The school had asked her to withdraw quietly. The story about her falling into depression and taking her own life had been nothing but a lie. She simply couldn't handle the humiliation and pressure, so she fled back home. Later, she somehow got in touch with Ryan Carter, who by then had already built a successful reputation. She exaggerated her story, painting herself as the poor victim, and successfully stirred up his desire to protect her. So the fragile white flower he thought he was saving had been nothing but a carefully woven illusion from start to finish. "No, it's not like that. Ryan, please let me explain," Lily stammered, panic spreading across her face as she grabbed his arm. Ryan jerked away violently as though burned. His eyes were bloodshot, filled with disbelief and rage so deep it looked like it could devour her whole. "You lied to me," he hissed hoarsely. "You actually lied to me." Terrified, Lily stumbled backward and fell to the floor, finally breaking down in tears. "Yes, I lied to you. So what?" she screamed hysterically, pointing at him. "Why? Why does she get everything? Emma Nolan has the perfect family, perfect looks, perfect brains. Everyone loves her. And you, Ryan, you were the fool. You chose me, so how is that my fault?" She laughed bitterly through her tears. "In our past life she was always above you, wasn't she? That's what ate you up inside. I helped you pull her down. You should be thanking me." The entire hall had gone silent, everyone watching this disgraceful spectacle unfold. It was, ironically, the most dramatic performance of the entire awards ceremony. I watched the two of them tear each other apart, calm and detached, without even a ripple of emotion. Stepping down from the stage, I returned to stand beside Professor Quinn. He handed me a bottle of water and smiled kindly. "That must have been hard on you." I shook my head, twisting the cap open. "Not really," I said quietly, taking a sip. "I just think it's a pity I wasted so many years on people like that." After the truth came out, Lily completely lost her mind. She knew she couldn't stay at the university any longer. So before leaving, she tried to land one final blow. She snuck into the university archives and copied confidential unpublished core data from our research project, then sent it to another university in China that was working on similar studies. She wanted to frame me for academic misconduct and destroy me completely. But what she didn't know was that every move she made had already been caught on the lab's surveillance cameras. And the core data she had stolen, it wasn't real. It was a trap, one that Professor Quinn and I had set in advance. That file she sent was full of deliberate flaws and false information. The rival university received it with excitement, thinking they had struck gold. They stayed up all night analyzing it, only to realize the next morning that they had been deceived. Humiliated and furious, they immediately filed a formal complaint to our university, demanding severe punishment for what they called a case of malicious academic fraud. With clear evidence and multiple witnesses, Lily was taken away by the police. All color had drained from her face. In the end, she was sentenced to 3 years in prison for stealing proprietary research and defamation. A student who once had a promising future ended up in complete ruin. As for Ryan Carter, his name was dragged down with hers in the scandal. All his academic qualifications were revoked, and even graduating became a problem. No advisor wanted him. No research group would take him. He fell from his pedestal, shattered completely. Desperate, he went everywhere begging for help. Until one day, he even knelt before Professor Quinn, pleading for mercy. But Professor Quinn only shook his head. If he had known how things would end, he might have thought twice before starting down that path. That summer I didn't go home. I stayed on campus to continue my research. Winning the National Award for Scientific and Technological Progress had brought our project unprecedented attention and funding. Professor Quinn began involving me in deeper levels of research, allowing me to participate in the project's most critical developments. When the new semester began in September, even bigger news arrived. Our university had launched a joint training program with Oxford University. One exchange student each year would be selected to join their research team. The value of that opportunity far exceeded the guaranteed admission slot I'd once lost. It was a chance that could redefine a person's career. Every student in the physics department was fighting for it. One afternoon in Professor Quinn's office, he handed me a recommendation form. "Emma," he said warmly, "I've recommended you. Everyone has seen your talent and hard work. Go. It's time you took your place on a bigger stage." I held the form tightly, my fingers trembling. In my previous life, Ryan Carter had begged me to help him with this very opportunity. I'd spent nights helping him polish his application, but in the end, he lost the spot by a narrow margin, a loss he'd never gotten over. And now, in this life, that same opportunity had fallen into my hands. When the announcement was posted, the entire campus erupted in excitement. I became the person everyone admired, envied, whispered about. Ryan stood for a long time in front of the bulletin board where my name was printed. As I walked past, he called out softly, "Emma, can we talk?" His voice trembled just slightly, and when I turned to look at him, I could see the storm of emotions in his eyes. Jealousy, bitterness, and something that looked faintly like nostalgia. I shook my head. "There's nothing left for us to talk about." He stood there watching me walk away. His fists clenched and released over and over until finally his hands just hung at his sides. Maybe at that moment he finally realized what it was he had thrown away. The recommendation slot he had given up for Lily, the one I'd never even cared about, had led me down the very path he'd dreamed of and the bright future he'd longed for. I had walked into it effortlessly. Years later, I earned my PhD, stayed on as a faculty member, and eventually established my own independent research lab. I became the youngest associate professor in the physics department. At an alumni reunion event, I saw Ryan again. He was wearing an old suit, faded from too many washes, and he looked completely out of place among the polished guests. The once confident, charming campus star now looked tired, aged, and worn down by life. I'd heard that after graduation he'd taken an ordinary job as a technician at a small company, a life of mediocrity and missed chances. When he saw me, his eyes darted away as if afraid to meet mine. A few times he seemed to want to approach me, but he hesitated. When the event was nearly over, he finally mustered the courage to step in front of me. "Emma," he said hoarsely. I stopped and looked at him calmly. "Yes, Mr. Carter." The color drained from his face. He gave a bitter smile. "Do we really have to be this distant? I know I was wrong. Terribly wrong. But if I said I regret it, would there still be a chance for us?" I interrupted him gently but firmly. "Ryan Carter, do you know what I regret the most?" He looked up, a glimmer of hope flashing in his eyes. "I don't regret being betrayed," I said quietly. "I don't even regret losing that guaranteed admission." I paused, meeting his gaze steadily. "What I truly regret is that day long ago at the orphanage gates when I saw that boy in the crisp white shirt and let myself fall for him." He froze. I smiled, and for the first time that smile held no bitterness, only peace. "The path I took was my choice," I said softly. "I don't blame anyone, but from now on I'll walk my own road." I stepped around him and walked toward Professor Quinn and my colleagues who were standing a short distance away. They waved at me with warm smiles, and I walked toward them, toward the life I had built entirely on my own. Sunlight fell on them and on me, warm and bright. Ryan Carter stood frozen in place like a weathered statue carved from stone, unmoving and silent. His world was buried beneath a heavy snowstorm, while mine was in full bloom, vibrant with the colors of spring. Few more years passed. My research made a groundbreaking leap, earning me a nomination for one of the highest honors in the field of physics, the Fields Medal. As the youngest nominee, I flew to Geneva to attend the final award ceremony. Professor Quinn had already retired by then, but as my mentor and guiding light, he insisted on coming with me. The plane soared through the clouds, surrounded by an endless expanse of blue sky. As we drifted above the white mist, Professor Quinn looked at me, his eyes full of pride and warmth. "Nervous?" he asked. I shook my head, leaning back in my seat and gazing out at the clouds. "Not nervous," I said softly, "just appreciating the view." My phone buzzed with a notification, a message from my research team. They had sent me a photo of myself wearing a cartoon crown with a long thread of messages below it. "Our queen is coming home victorious." I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Professor Quinn chuckled too. "Those little monkeys," he said fondly. I turned off my phone, closed my eyes, and let the quiet hum of the plane fill my mind. All those entanglements from my past life, the love and the hate, the betrayal and the regret felt as distant as the drifting clouds outside the window, left far behind in the sky. In this second life, I once thought I had been reborn to face punishment. But walking down this new path, I finally understood it wasn't punishment. It was redemption. It wasn't a tragedy. It was another kind of happiness. It was a gift from fate, a chance to see clearly who was genuine and who was false. And more importantly, a chance to choose a life that truly belonged to me. In this lifetime there was no Ryan Carter, no perfect couple halo. But I had something far better. A mentor I deeply respected, teammates who fought beside me, and a career I loved enough to dedicate my whole life to.